They say there's no pain like losing a child. I never truly understood that until the day I buried my daughter, Sophie. She was only 38, full of life, with a laugh that could light up a room and a talent for turning empty spaces into warm, beautiful homes as an interior designer. But in one cruel moment, a car accident stole her from me, leaving a hole in my heart that I knew would never heal. I'm Eleanor, a retired schoolteacher, 65 years old, and nothing in my life prepared me for the grief that swallowed me whole that day. But it wasn't just losing Sophie that broke me. It was the betrayal that came after, a betrayal I never could have imagined. The funeral was a blur of faces, hushed voices and flowers that seemed to mock the emptiness inside me. I stood by her coffin, staring at the polished wood, trying to make sense of a world without her. Sophie's smile, her sketches scattered across her desk, the way she'd call me just to chat about her latest project. It was all gone. I should have been sobbing, but I felt hollow, like a part of me had been ripped away and buried with her. Then there was Nathan, my son-in-law. He stood across the room, his face blank, his eyes dry. He didn't hold my hand or offer a single word of comfort. Instead, he kept glancing at his phone, his fingers tapping impatiently. At one point I saw him step away to whisper with a stranger in the corner, their voices low and urgent. It struck me as odd, but I brushed it off at first. Grief does strange things to people, I told myself. Maybe he was in shock, trying to hold it together in his own way. But as the day wore on, that uneasy feeling grew. Nathan wasn't grieving. He was detached. He barely acknowledged the friends and family who'd come to honor Sophie. When someone offered condolences, he'd nod curtly and look away, like he was somewhere else entirely. I watched him from across the room, my heart aching for my daughter, but also heavy with a nagging dread. Something was wrong. I couldn't put my finger on it, but it was there, like a shadow lurking just out of sight. By the time the last guest left, I was alone with my thoughts, the silence deafening. I didn't know it then, but that day was just the beginning. This pain of losing Sophie was unbearable, but what I was about to uncover would shatter everything I thought I knew about the man she'd married. The days after Sophie's funeral felt like wading through fog. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. The silence in my house was suffocating, so I turned to the only thing that felt like a piece of her, her belongings. I drove to her house, the one she'd poured her heart into decorating, hoping to find some comfort in her sketches or the little trinkets she loved. Instead, I found something that turned my grief into rage. In Sophie's study, tucked away in a drawer, was a folder of bank statements. I wasn't looking for them, but something made me open it. My hands shook as I read the numbers. $250,000, withdrawn from the joint account Sophie and I shared, the one we'd set up years ago for her dreams, a home, a business, a future. The withdrawal was dated the day of her funeral, and it was made in Sophie's name. I felt my chest tighten, my breath catching in my throat. This wasn't a mistake. It was theft. And there was only one person who could have done it. Nathan. I sat there staring at the papers, my mind racing. How could he? While I was saying goodbye to my daughter, while her body was still warm in that coffin, Nathan was stealing from her. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. I trusted him, welcomed him into our family, believed he loved Sophie. But this was cold, calculated, and cruel. That night, as I sat at my kitchen table, the weight of it all pressing down on me, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Nathan isn't who you think he is. Be careful. He's hiding something bigger than you know." My heart pounded as I read it again. But when I tried to reply, the message vanished like it had never existed. I clutched the phone, my mind spiraling. Who sent it? What did they know? The words echoed in my head, feeding the unease that had been growing since the funeral. I didn't have answers, only questions. But one thing was clear. Nathan had crossed a line. That $250,000 wasn't just money. It was Sophie's legacy, her hopes, everything she'd worked for. And he'd taken it without a shred of shame. I didn't know where to start, but I knew I couldn't let this go. Something was terribly wrong, and I was going to find out what. The grief was still there, heavy and raw, but now it was mixed with something else. A burning need to uncover the truth, no matter what it cost me. The discovery of that $250,000 withdrawal lit a fire in me, but it also left me lost. Where do you even begin when the person you trusted betrays you in the worst way? I couldn't shake the image of Nathan at Sophie's funeral, his cold eyes, his restless hands. I needed answers, and sitting still wasn't going to get me any. So I went back to Sophie's house, hoping to find something, anything that could make sense of this nightmare. Walking through her front door felt like stepping into a memory. Every corner of that house held a piece of her. The soft throw blankets she'd picked out, the sketches of furniture designs pinned to a corkboard, the faint scent of her lavender candles. It was Sophie's sanctuary, the place where she'd built a life as a brilliant interior designer. But now it was just empty. I wandered from room to room, my heart breaking all over again. Her laughter was gone, her warmth snuffed out. I sat on her couch, clutching one of her old sweaters, and let the tears come. Then in her bedroom, I found it. Under the bed, hidden beneath a stack of design magazines, was a small leather-bound notebook. My hands trembled as I opened it. It was Sophie's journal, her neat handwriting filling every page. I wasn't sure I could bear to read it, but I had to know. What I found shattered me in ways I hadn't thought possible. Sophie wrote about her life with Nathan, and it wasn't the happy marriage I'd believed in. She described how he'd changed over the years, how the charming real estate broker she'd fallen in love with had turned controlling, manipulative. He'd pressure her to sign contracts for his shady property deals, papers she didn't fully understand. "I feel like I'm losing myself," she wrote in one entry. "Nathan watches every move I make. He gets angry if I question him. I want to leave, but I'm scared he'll never let me go." My chest ached as I read her words. How had I missed this? I'd seen Sophie's tired eyes during her visits, noticed how she'd dodge questions about Nathan, but I'd told myself it was just stress from work. She was always so strong, so full of light. I thought she'd tell me if something was wrong. But now, reading her journal, I saw the truth. My daughter had been trapped, and I'd failed to see her pain. I kept reading, each page a fresh wound. Sophie wrote about how Nathan had isolated her from friends, convincing her they didn't really care. He'd monitor her phone, question her about every call, every text. In one heartbreaking entry, she said, "I don't know who I am anymore. I just want to be free, but I'm terrified of what he'll do if I try to leave." I closed the journal, tears streaming down my face. I'd always trusted Nathan, welcomed him like a son, but he'd been a monster, and Sophie had paid the price. That journal changed everything. It wasn't just about the money anymore. I started to wonder if Sophie's death was really an accident. The thought felt like a knife in my gut, but I couldn't shake it. If Nathan was capable of stealing from her, of controlling her life, what else could he do? I pulled out the bank statements again, poring over every detail. That's when I noticed something else. Nathan's name was listed as the sole beneficiary on Sophie's life insurance policy, a policy she'd taken out years ago when her business started to thrive. Why hadn't she told me? Had Nathan pressured her into that too? I started digging deeper, calling the bank to ask about the account. The manager's voice was hesitant, but he confirmed my worst fears. Several large transfers had been made to an account in Nathan's name, in the months before Sophie's death. My hands shook as I scribbled down the dates and amounts. This wasn't a one-time theft. It was a pattern, a plan. And it all pointed to Nathan. But even with this, I didn't have enough. I needed more proof, something concrete to tie Nathan to Sophie's death. The journal, the bank records, they were pieces of a puzzle, but I didn't know how they fit together yet. I felt overwhelmed, like I was drowning in questions with no answers. Where could I go from here? Who could I trust? The anonymous text from that night kept echoing in my mind. He's hiding something bigger than you know. I sat at Sophie's desk, surrounded by her sketches, and made a promise to her. I'll find out what happened to you, I whispered. I'll make him pay for what he's done. The grief was still there, raw and heavy, but it was mixed with something new, a fierce determination. I didn't know how to unravel this mess, but I knew I couldn't stop. Sophie deserved justice, and I was going to fight for it, no matter what it took. I had no idea then just how dark this path would become, or how much it would cost me. But I was ready to face it, for her. Sophie's journal had opened a door I couldn't close. Her words haunted me, painting a picture of a marriage that was more like a prison. Nathan's control, his manipulation, the way he'd stripped her of her freedom, it all made me question everything. Was her death really an accident, or was it something worse? The thought was unbearable, but I couldn't ignore it. I needed to know the truth, and I needed to start somewhere. So I decided to go to the place where Sophie's life ended, the site of the car crash. It was a quiet, lonely stretch of road just outside our small town, lined with barren fields and crooked trees. The air felt heavy as I pulled up, my heart pounding. There wasn't much to see, just a patch of dirt marked by faded tire tracks and a makeshift memorial of flowers now wilted. But standing there, I could almost feel Sophie, her presence, lingering in the stillness. I closed my eyes, picturing her behind the wheel, her kind eyes, her steady hands. How did it happen? How did my careful, cautious daughter end up here? I wasn't alone for long. A retired EMT, Tom, who'd been at the scene that night, agreed to meet me. He was a gruff man with gray hair and kind eyes, and I could tell he didn't want to relive that night. But I pressed him, desperate for answers. "Tom, please," I said, my voice shaking. "Something doesn't feel right about Sophie's accident. Can you tell me what you saw?" He hesitated, then sighed. "Eleanor, it was strange. The car didn't look like it had been in a high-speed crash. There were no skid marks, no signs she'd tried to brake. It was like the car just stopped in the ditch." My stomach churned as he went on. "And the gas tank? It looked tampered with, like someone had messed with it before the crash. I didn't want to say anything at the time, but it's been nagging at me. Tampered with?" The words hit me like a punch. Sophie was meticulous, always checking her car before long drives. She wouldn't have missed something like that. I pressed Tom further. "Do you think it could have been intentional?" He shifted uncomfortably, then nodded. "I can't say for sure, but it didn't feel like a normal accident. The police are looking into it again, but you didn't hear that from me." I thanked him, my mind racing as I drove home. A tampered gas tank. No skid marks. It wasn't an accident. It couldn't be. And if it wasn't, there was only one person who'd benefit from Sophie's death. Nathan. The life insurance policy, the stolen $250,000, his coldness at the funeral, it was all starting to fit together. And the picture it painted was horrifying. I couldn't wait any longer. That evening, I confronted Nathan. He was at his office, surrounded by real estate listings, looking every bit the polished broker he pretended to be. "Nathan," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "I went to the crash site today. The EMT said the car didn't skid. The gas tank was tampered with, What do you know about it?" His eyes flicked up, and for a split second, I saw something. Fear, maybe, or guilt. But then his face smoothed over, that practiced calm taking over. "Eleanor, you're torturing yourself," he said, his tone almost pitying. "Sophie's gone. It was a tragic accident. You're seeing things that aren't there." His words were smooth, but they didn't fool me. He was dodging, deflecting, just like he always did. I stepped closer, my anger rising. "Don't lie to me, Nathan. You weren't grieving at her funeral. You were stealing from her while we buried her. What else are you hiding?" He stood, his jaw tight, but he kept his voice low. "You need to let this go, Eleanor, for your own sake. You're only making it harder for everyone." He turned away, dismissing me, but I saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched. He was nervous, and that told me I was on the right track. I left his office, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and fury. Nathan wasn't just a thief. He was something far worse. I started digging deeper, calling the bank again, pulling every record I could find. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became. Nathan was at the center of this, and I was going to prove it. But I had to be careful. If he was capable of tampering with Sophie's car, what else could he do? The confrontation with Nathan left me shaken, but it also lit a spark I hadn't felt in weeks. His smooth lies, his cold dismissal, they only confirmed what I already suspected. He was hiding something, and it was bigger than the stolen $250,000. Sophie's journal, the tampered gas tank, the life insurance policy, it was all starting to form a picture, one that made my blood run cold. I couldn't stop now. I owed it to Sophie to uncover every last secret Nathan was keeping, but I knew I couldn't do this alone. I wasn't a detective, just a retired school teacher with a broken heart and a burning need for justice. So I hired a private investigator, a no-nonsense woman named Carla, who came recommended by a friend. I handed her everything, the bank statements, Sophie's journal, the details from the crash site. "Find out who Nathan really is," I told her. "I need to know what he's done." While Carla dug into Nathan's past, I kept searching for answers on my own. I reached out to one of Sophie's old colleagues, a fellow designer named Rachel, who'd worked with her on countless projects. We met at a quiet cafe, and the moment I saw Rachel's face, I knew she was carrying a weight of her own. "Eleanor?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I should have told you sooner, but I was scared. Sophie was planning to leave Nathan." My heart stopped. "Leave him?" I asked, leaning closer. Rachel nodded, her eyes filling with tears. She'd had enough. Nathan was suffocating her, controlling her money, her time, everything. A few weeks before the accident, she told me she'd signed a lease for a new apartment. She was going to start over, take back her life, but she was terrified of him. She said he'd threatened her, told her she'd regret it if she tried to walk away. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Sophie, my strong, vibrant daughter, had been living in fear, and I hadn't known. Rachel went on, her voice trembling. "She was so close to getting out, Eleanor. She'd started hiding money, small amounts Nathan wouldn't notice, but then the accident happened." Her words hung between us, heavy with unspoken suspicion. I thanked Rachel, my mind reeling. Sophie had been fighting for her freedom, and Nathan had known it. Had that been his motive? Had he killed her to keep her from leaving? Carla's first report came a few days later, and it was worse than I'd imagined. Nathan wasn't just a controlling husband. He was a career manipulator. She'd uncovered a trail of shady real estate deals stretching back years. Nathan had been sued twice for forging signatures on property contracts, though he'd managed to settle out of court both times. There were unpaid loans, hidden bank accounts, and a pattern of deceit that made my stomach turn. This guy's a pro at covering his tracks, Carla said. But he's sloppy when he's desperate. And Eleanor, he's desperate now. Her words sent a chill down my spine. Desperate. That's what Nathan had been at the funeral, wasn't it? Not grieving, but scheming. I asked Carla to keep digging, and in the meantime, I went back to the bank records. That's when I found something that made my heart race. In the months before Sophie's death, several large transfers had been made from her business account to an offshore account in Nathan's name. They weren't just random withdrawals. They were systematic, timed to avoid suspicion. And then there was the life insurance policy. Carla confirmed Nathan had called the insurance company the morning after the accident, hours before the police had even released Sophie's body. How could he have known so soon? Unless he'd planned it all. The pieces were falling into place, but it still wasn't enough. I needed something undeniable, something that would prove Nathan wasn't just a thief, but a murderer. I started calling Sophie's other friends, anyone who might know more. Most of them were hesitant, afraid to get involved, but one, a former classmate named Mark, told me something that made my blood run cold. Sophie came to me a month before she died, he said. She was nervous, said Nathan was acting strange, talking about securing their future in a way that scared her. She thought he was planning something, but she didn't know what. I hung up the phone, my hands trembling. Planning something. That's what this was. A plan. The money, the insurance, the accident. It wasn't random. Nathan had orchestrated it all, and Sophie had sensed it, even if she didn't fully understand. I felt a surge of anger, but also fear. If Nathan was capable of this, what would he do to me if he knew I was closing in? I kept my notes hidden, locked in a drawer, and started checking my doors at night. The anonymous text from weeks ago echoed in my mind. He's hiding something bigger than you know. I was getting closer to the truth, but I was also stepping into dangerous territory. Nathan wasn't just a liar or a thief. I was scared, but I couldn't stop. Sophie's life, her dreams, her fight for freedom, it all depended on me. I wasn't going to let Nathan win. Not now, not ever. Every new piece of evidence against Nathan felt like a step closer to justice, but it also tightened the knot of fear in my chest. His lies, his threats, the cold calculation behind Sophie's death. It was almost too much to bear. I thought I'd seen the worst of him, that I knew the depths of his betrayal. But I was wrong. Late one night, as I sat alone in my living room, an email arrived that turned my world upside down. It came from an anonymous address, the subject line simply reading, "Listen to this." My heart raced as I opened it and found an audio file attached. With trembling fingers, I clicked play. Nathan's voice filled the room, smooth and arrogant, just as I'd heard it in our confrontations. "She was getting in the way," he said, his tone chillingly casual. Sophie thought she could leave, start over. But I had plans, and she wasn't part of them. The insurance money, the accounts, it's all mine now. The crash was clean, just like we planned. I froze, my breath catching. But it was the second voice that shattered me. It was a woman, her words sharp and complicit. "You're sure no one suspects? I gave you her schedule, Nathan. I did my part." My blood ran cold as I recognized her. Clara, Sophie's best friend since college, the woman I'd trusted like a second daughter. She'd been at the funeral, her eyes red with tears, her arms around me as she whispered how much she'd loved Sophie. And all along, she'd been helping Nathan destroy her. The recording ended, but I couldn't move. Clara had known Sophie's every move, her plans to leave, her fears. She'd handed that information to Nathan, knowing what he'd do with it. For what? Money? A cut of the insurance payout. I felt sick, the betrayal cutting deeper than anything Nathan had done. He was a monster, but Clara, she'd been family. She'd sat in my kitchen, laughed with Sophie, shared her secrets. And now I knew she'd sold her out. I clutched the phone, tears streaming down my face. Sophie had trusted Clara just like I had. How could she do this? The pain was raw, but it fueled something else, a fierce, unshakable resolve. Nathan and Clara thought they could bury the truth, but they'd underestimated me. I saved the recording, my hands steady now. This was the proof I needed, not just to expose Nathan, but to bring them both down. Sophie deserved that much. And I was going to make sure they paid. Clara's betrayal was a wound that cut deeper than I could have imagined, but it also gave me the weapon I needed. That recording, Nathan's cold confession, Clara's complicity, was undeniable proof of what they'd done to Sophie. I played it over and over, each word fueling my resolve. They thought they could outsmart everyone, erase Sophie's life, and walk away with her money. But they didn't know me. I wasn't just a grieving mother. I was a mother who'd fight, to her last breath for her daughter. I started with Nathan. I needed him to know I wasn't backing down. I arranged to meet him at his house, the one he and Sophie had shared, now stripped of her warmth. He was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through his phone, his face as smug as ever. "Nathan," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "We need to talk about the $250,000 you stole, about the insurance policy, and about what you and Clara did to Sophie." His head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. For a moment I saw a flicker of panic, but he quickly masked it with a condescending smile. "Eleanor, you're losing it," he said, leaning back in his chair. "This obsession of yours is not healthy. Sophie's gone. Let it go." His voice was smooth, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the way his fingers gripped the phone a little too tightly. I stepped closer, holding his gaze. "I'm not letting anything go, Nathan. I have proof. A recording of you admitting you planned her death. You and Clara plotting to kill her for the money. It's over." His face paled, the smugness gone. He stood abruptly, his voice rising. "You're bluffing. You don't have anything. You're just a sad old woman making things up to feel better." That's when I pulled out my phone and played the recording. Nathan's own voice filled the room. "The crash was clean, just like we planned." Clara's voice followed, cold and calculating. "I gave you her schedule, Nathan." He froze, his eyes wide with fear. For the first time, he looked like a man who knew he'd lost. "Where did you get that?" he stammered, his voice shaking. I didn't answer. Instead, I said, "You thought you could buy me off, scare me into silence. But you're wrong. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you did." He lunged forward, his face twisted with desperation. "You don't know what you're doing, Eleanor. If you go public, you'll regret it. I can make this worth your while, money, anything you want. Just drop it." His offer made my stomach turn. Money? He was offering me Sophie's money, the same money he'd stolen to betray her memory. "You're pathetic," I said, my voice low and furious. "You took my daughter's life and you think you can buy me. You're going to pay, Nathan, for everything." He backed away, his hands trembling, but I saw the rage in his eyes. "You'll be sorry," he muttered before storming out. I knew I had to act fast. I took the recording, the bank records, and Sophie's journal to the police. The detective listened carefully, his face growing grim as he reviewed the evidence. "This is serious, Eleanor," he said. "We'll need to move quickly." I also called a lawyer, someone who could help me navigate the legal mess Nathan had created. Together we built a case that was airtight, but I didn't stop there. I wanted Sophie's story to be heard. I gathered our family, Sophie's cousins, aunts, and uncles, for a meeting at my house. I played the recording and laid out every piece of evidence: the stolen money, the tampered car, Nathan's lies. Some of Nathan's relatives scoffed, insisting I was overreacting, that grief had clouded my judgment. "He's not perfect, but he's not a killer," one of them said. Their denial stung, but I stood my ground. "Listen to the recording," I said. "This is the truth." Slowly, a few family members, including Sophie's cousin Lisa, started to see Nathan for who he really was. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. The trial came faster than I expected. Walking into that courtroom felt like stepping into a battlefield. Nathan sat across from me, his face composed, but I could see the cracks in his facade. Clara was there too, her head bowed, avoiding my eyes. The prosecution presented the evidence, the recording, the bank transfers, the tampered gas tank. Nathan's lawyer tried to spin it, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, that Sophie's death was a tragic accident, but the recording was too damning. When it played in court, the room went silent. Nathan's voice, bragging about his clean plan, echoed like a confession. The jury didn't take long. Nathan was found guilty of murder and financial fraud, sentenced to 20 years in prison. Clara, for her role as an accomplice, received 5 years. As the judge read the verdict, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, but it wasn't joy. It was relief, tinged with an aching emptiness. Justice had been served, but it didn't bring Sophie back. Nothing could. I looked at Nathan one last time as he was led away, his head down, his arrogance gone. He'd lost everything, just like he'd taken everything from my daughter. Leaving the courtroom, I felt the eyes of our family on me, some supportive, some resentful, but I didn't care. I'd done what I had to do for Sophie. Her life, her love, her dreams, they weren't forgotten. And though the pain of losing her would never fade, I'd kept my promise. Nathan and Clara would pay for their betrayal, and Sophie's truth was out in the open where it belonged. The courtroom doors closed behind me, and the weight of everything, grief, anger, justice, settled over me like a heavy fog. Nathan and Clara were gone, locked away for what they'd done to Sophie, but the victory felt hollow. I'd fought so hard, uncovered every lie, faced every betrayal, and yet my daughter was still gone. No sentence, no verdict could bring her back. I stood outside, surrounded by family who'd finally seen the truth, but all I could feel was the ache of her absence. In the weeks that followed, I found myself at Sophie's grave, a quiet corner of the cemetery where wildflowers grew. I brought her favorite lavender candle, its soft glow flickering in the dusk. Sitting there, I spoke to her. Something I hadn't done since she was a little girl, curled up in my lap. "I did it, Sophie," I whispered. "I made them pay. I hope you're proud." The tears came, but they weren't bitter anymore. For the first time, I let go of the guilt, the what-ifs, the rage that had consumed me. I let myself grieve, not as a mother seeking justice, but as a mother who loved her daughter beyond words. I knew I couldn't stay stuck in that pain forever. Sophie wouldn't have wanted that. She was light, creativity, joy. She'd want me to live, to find meaning again. So I started small. I joined a support group for parents who'd lost children, a place where I could share her story and listen to others. Their voices, their strength, reminded me I wasn't alone. I began volunteering at a local community center, teaching art classes, something Sophie had always loved. It wasn't much, but it felt like a way to keep her spirit alive. Standing, here now, I'm not the same woman I was before. The hole in my heart will always be there, but it's softer now, less jagged. I've learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means carrying the love and the loss together, letting them shape you into something stronger. Sophie's life, her courage, her dreams, they're still with me, guiding me forward. If you're listening, I hope you'll share your story too. Pain can feel like a prison, but speaking it, facing it can set you free. Sophie taught me that. Thank you for hearing her story, for keeping her light alive. Don't forget to subscribe, and please let your voice be heard in the comments. It matters more than you know.